Welcome, everyone. I'm Juliet Palmer. I am the president of the Canadian New Music Network, and I'm really delighted that you're all here tonight for the fifth in our Decolonization Conversation series. So I'm originally from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I now make my home in Te Toronto, which is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. CNMN brings together music and sound creators, producers, performers, educators, and listeners, offering resources and opportunities for mutual exchange and learning. Based in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, on unceded Indigenous land of which the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation are the recognized custodians, CNMN's membership spans the territories of the many nations of Turtle Island. Our discussion tonight, Songs We've Always Known, Our Ways of Creating Song and Sound, is curated and led by Curtis Running Rabbit Lefthand, multimedia creative producer, musician, spoken word artist, and scholar. Curtis is the founder and the executive director of Indigenous Resilience in Music, and it's really wonderful to have Curtis back with us. Curtis was here for a conversation way back in May 2020 when we were all still reeling from the pandemic, and we were talking about from new to normal. So it's really great to have you back. I loved your grounded and insightful perspective last time out, and you're thrilled that you're here again, and you've brought with you an amazing group of unique and powerful voices in Indigenous music from across Turtle Island. So we have Matthew Cardinal, KP of Black Belt Eagle Scout, Wyatt C Lewis, and Hannah Owlchild. And so, Curtis, I'm delighted to hand it over to you.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, thank you to everyone for joining us. I'll just do a quick, well, thank you for the introduction already. I'll do a quick introduction in my language. But yeah, Okinik Sikoaks, Nitotatsiop, and Stoanokas Stomachka, Nidave Beach Six Gasim, Curtis Running Rabbit Lefthand. Nan Mohtoto Sixiga in Sitopi Mokinsis. Hello, my name is Curtis Running Rabbit Lefthand. My Indian name is Running Rabbit. My name comes from my ancestor and great grandfather, Chief Running Rabbit of the Siksika people of the Northern Blackfoot. And I come from, again, the Siksika Nation, also the Amskapi Piikani Nation and Stoney Nakoda community as well. And Juliet said and mentioned that I do a lot of work in music and, creating platforms or trying to create platforms and work with Indigenous musicians and even non-Indigenous musicians and furthering the call of having Indigenous people and Indigenous artists be offered the space and take up space where they're deserving of it on their traditional lands or as visitors of other lands. And yeah, thank you for having me here. Shake hands with all of you that are attending today. And yeah, pleased to have this whole thing happen. And it's been a time, connecting with CNMN and all the great folks there and putting together, this whole program and having me come on as a curator and a guest host and having the wonderful people that are going to be a part of today's discussion. And I just want to have this discussion free flowing. And for anyone who's tuning in, I want to have this something that is, you're going to hear from Indigenous voices in music where they get to share, what they're doing and about who they are and, not necessarily answering the term decolonization, but just talking about, taking up that space and having that platform and sharing what their music is all about and who they are, what they do on a day-to-day basis and just how they create the music they create and why they're so good at it too. So again, thank you for having me. And we're gonna open the floor for introductions. And I would like to just offer all of the speakers to introduce themselves. And we can start off with Matthew Cardinal, if you want to introduce yourself and if that's okay, and then we'll just kind of move down the line from there. Sound good? Sugapi, thank you.
Okay, Oki, Tansei. Hello, my name is Matthew Cardinal. I'm a musician from up north, Alberta, Lac La Biche area, Beaver Lake. It's my band. I'm currently living in Amiskwaci, Edmonton, and I'm a musician, I suppose. I make music, mostly ambient these days. I do a lot of scoring for documentaries and short films and stuff like that. And yeah, that's me. Hello.
Awesome. And Matt, you also used to play with Nihewak.
Oh yeah. I also played in a band called Nahiowak.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing band. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. We're really excited to hear from you. And KP, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you. Hi. Thank you all for coming. My name is KP, and I'm from the Swinomish Indian tribal community in so-called Northwest Washington State. I'm also part Anipaq from so-called Northern Alaska, Arctic Circle area. And I am a recording artist and a touring musician, and the my most current project that I've been working on is called Black Belt Eagle Scout. And yeah, I'm happy to be here and to be in discussion with everyone. And I'm just really excited to be able to just chat and have this discussion. So thank you so much for having me.
Sugapi, KP, thank you so much for joining us too, and we're really excited to hear from you. Yeah, it's gonna be a great conversation. Hannah, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Hannah Owlchild. I am from the band Third Generation. I'm the lead guitarist and one of the vocalists for the band. We're a family band, so my brother Lennon Owlchild, he plays the drums, and then our cousin Erin Manyhead, she plays the bass. So it's a family band, and we've been playing for, I'd say, 8 years now, kind of a long time. We've been kind of taking it slow in terms of the recording, but right now we're in the studio and we're excited for that. Yeah, and I forgot to mention that I'm from Siksika Nation. And yeah, I'm excited to be here and to be a part of this discussion. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much, Hannah. Yeah, we come from the same community, and I think we found out that we're cousins at one point. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. Yeah, and we'll continue on. Wyatt, would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Tansei, I'm Wyatt C Lewis. Right now I'm situated in Treaty 7 territory, in Wilkinsis, and originally from Treaty 6 territory. My dad still kind of lives there, and I was born there and raised, and then I about 4 years ago made the move to Calgary here with my fiance, and been experiencing the music scene here and the culture, and excited to learn more. And I'm making a record right now. I'm just kind of wrapping up the first album here, and learning so much about what that means to make a record in the pandemic, and then releasing it as well. We're working on that as well as marketing. So I'm really grateful to be here. Looking forward to hearing everybody's perspective and their journeys. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate Sugapi. You actually just kind of, the ending there to your introduction kind of segues into the first question, which is, like a lot of people in a lot of discussions I've been a part of, like the question is, we see the different impacts that are happening from COVID-19, the necessary restrictions, health restrictions that are being put in place that changes every day. They change consistently. They change how we interact with each other. And how we can connect, in our circles, our community, and all of that. So my first question is, how have these changes and these restrictions affected your process of within your creativity and writing your music? if we can start off with, actually, we'll start off with Wyatt, since you ended the introduction there. We'll start off with you if you want to share with us about the record and how, the writing and creativity behind it in a pandemic has affected, if it has affected it in any way.
It's been really strange. Yeah, it's been such a strange time. I didn't really, consider myself like a touring artist. I definitely have done more performances just kind of here in Calgary and being part of that scene. But then kind of tapping into recording, that was a big step for me in collaborating with people and how important that is, kind of building that community. And I'm kind of in the journey of creating my team and what that looks like for me and people that can share the same vision and can contribute to something. But yeah, I guess the first bit I would have to thank IRIM for just even reaching out and giving me the platform to continue to make money by doing live streaming. And I know that's been a challenge, as well as trying to be kind of tech savvy or doing things by yourself. And yeah, so I guess first bit of COVID there was really challenging, just trying to find a healthy routine. And I guess it really helped me push and working it with demos and all the pre-production for the record. So I used that time for the project. Yeah, hope that answers that.
No, it does. And it's a different, like I said, it's very changing. The environment's changing, and the fact that you can actually do that and like reaching into the recording realm, I know that can be sometimes difficult, but also you're making it work. So that's really, it's positive to see stuff like that happening. KP, like, how do you feel, like, how has the pandemic affected you with, like, performances? I see that you've been doing, live performances like through YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And how has it affected, like, like even like writing or just even performing in a time like this, like virtually and what have you?
Yeah, so I think I've been more open to just performing virtually than writing. And I mean, honestly, I feel like the pandemic and everything that has happened has sort of blocked my creativity, and it's been really difficult to, like, feel creative. I feel like first and foremost, like, my survival skills kind of kicked in, and I was like, I need to figure out how to survive. And my creativity sort of went to the back burner a little bit, in terms of, I guess, like making new music, or like, sitting down and playing guitar for like something like that's new for like a therapeutic way. And I've been doing virtual performances because it sort of forces me to play guitar, and every time I do one, it's like I feel better. And because with music has always been a way of processing everything that I go through in my life, and all of my feelings and like my identity and everything. And so to just, say like, okay, yes, I want to do this show, I'm going to essentially just force myself to do it. I have been feeling better in that way. Before COVID hit a year ago, pretty much, I was a touring musician. I toured full time. And so I had to stop doing that and just sort of focus in on my family and figure out like how, we're going to survive. And so I pretty much changed my life almost, and figured out a different way of living, which still kind of includes music, but not as heavily as I have that has been in the past. So hopefully in the future there will be more creative writing processes, but I'm still sort of in this, like, I don't know, trying to survive period.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I definitely feel that with, like, having the time or just trying to like manage being creative. It can be really difficult sometimes, especially like, we have to, I guess, in a way, like with the restrictions, we have to be in isolation sometimes, and it can be difficult because, you know, those connections, and, you know, for some Indigenous folks, you know, that's really important to us to be able to connect and communicate with other people and on that level. And sometimes, you know, being isolated does work for people, and it depends, right? And so it's awesome that you know, like, it's understandable, like, you know, finding the footing to be creative. But, you know, once this is gone, this pandemic's gone, I know we'll all be able to get back on track with that stuff, I guess, in a way. And the fact that you get to just like perform and do all of that is really, it's really powerful. It speaks to the ability that we can just kind of, you know, persevere to that. And I guess, Hannah, like you being, you know, with your like family and being in a family band, how does, like, you know, I'm guessing you get to you know, isolation in Siksika or here in Calgary. It has, it's interchanging or changing constantly, and being family, I'm sure you might have the chance to maybe, you know, practice or write together. Or what is that like? What is it like writing together? Or are you able to do that right now with your family in third generation?
Well, you'd think that, you know, it'd be easier, more access to being able to practice more and try and write, but it's actually kind of the opposite. Aaron, the bassist, and I were both in school right now, and Lennon, he's just kind of, you know, doing his thing right now. So he's the one who's really been grounding us and like saying, we got to practice, we got to try write stuff. So within this isolation time, I think it's kind of put into perspective just the shows that we've played before. It's not, we don't get to access that as much. So it's kind of, I guess to an extent, we've got kind of lazy with practicing. We did a live stream back at the end of October last year, and we practiced for a long time, and we also went to the studio, and then we just kind of, you know, put it away for a bit. And a couple of weeks ago was our first practice in like 4 months. So yeah, it's not the best story, I guess, but we're really trying hard to start practicing again, jamming again, and writing, especially right now, because we get kind of a bit shy sometimes with writing songs. A quick backstory, third generation, how we got our name is from our grandpa, he was in a few bands back in the 70s, and they toured the local area in Treaty 7 and pretty well known. And so, you know, we have our own rock star as a grandpa. And he actually passed down some of the songs to us, and that was his goal for us, is to record them and get them out there. And so that's mainly our focus, is those songs, recording them, perfecting them. It hasn't really left much to our own imaginations, writing, but we're trying to find our sound. It's a bit tricky, but I feel like we're getting the hang of it. So hopefully soon we'll have some of our own tunes.
For sure. And a lot of you folks are, like, from what I know, you're all like young and coming up, you know, like you're doing a lot of good work through your music, just like, you know, just getting your foot through the door in the music community and everything. And working with Iron, we're all just like always just so impressed by the performance, and, you know, and by everyone else. Luckily, we've like had the chance to work with all of you, which is great. And we've always just been like, just kind of like just blown away by all your performances. And Matt, you know, we had you and Nehewak perform with us many times before with IRIM and our showcases, and I've seen you do your solo stuff, and, you know, that stuff is amazing. And you've also done your own virtual performance for IRIM as well too. And you know, how has that been like? You know, your transition from now you've released your record. And, you know, all that stuff. What was that like, you know, getting ready to release that during a pandemic when things are kind of like shut down and those restrictions are again there and existing?
Yeah, it was kind of weird. But I wanted to release the album. Like it had been done for probably close to a year. Like, I think I started talking with the label in February, and then everything got shut down in March. And the album ended up coming out end of October. But, you know, I think that we were talking about maybe delaying it, but I just thought, like, there's no point. like, let's just get it out. And, you know, of course, I wanted to tour that album. I still want to tour it. So hopefully, you know, when things open again, I will. Haven't been able to really do that. But I have done a lot of live streams, which is good. I feel really lucky to have been asked to do a couple of them. One by IRIM I did a while ago, and various other things. One New Music Edmonton, and, you know, live streams, and a couple of like pre-recorded live performances. Just a very different thing. It feels very different from live. It's a lot of work. It's a very different feeling. I don't know. That's just what I'll leave it at that. But when I do it, it does feel like I've done something, which is nice, because it can be hard. You know, I'm not leaving the house much. And I'm just kind of, laying low. Luckily, I have the ability to record myself. Like, I recorded my first album by myself in my bedroom, basically. So I'm trying to do more and record more of that. But that has also been, you know, there's been some trouble there. And, you know, of course, motivation can be a bit harder, especially when you're always in the space where you work, I think. But I have been lucky to get other opportunities for scoring and things, and like that's really nice. It's helping me out a lot. So like, it's different not being able to play live. It's like, that was a huge part of my life. I was often, you know, almost every weekend I'd be going out and playing in a different city, flying out, or going on tour for a couple weeks. So it's like a really big lifestyle change to be in one place for so long and play music in my living room to the internet. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a very big life change for sure. And that actually kind of goes into my next question, because I want to like kind of like move and shift things to like, you know, prior, and I guess like during this time, but, you know, prior and during, you know, this interesting time, a lot of Indigenous people, Indigenous musicians, or those identifying as Indigenous in the music community, you know, our experiences in music and moving through the music community and the industry is you know, very different. And, you know, a lot of our experiences, our lived experiences are different, and a lot of our, you know, our worldviews within that journey is also very different. So I wanted to just ask the question to all of you, but I guess we can start off with KP. Like, what has your journey been like thus far, you know, from prior to the pandemic, during, and your lived experience, like in that time, from when, you know, even, I guess you were saying, like when you released your first LP or singles, and then moving into the release of At the Party with My Brown Friends. Like, what was that like? What was that transition like, and everything like that? And what was your experience been like so far?
Yeah, thanks for asking the question.
One sec. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think your mic, there's like feedback happening. It's grumbling.
Can you hear me better, or?
1 second. It might be on. 1 second here.
You could try leaving and coming back.
Okay.
It's a radical move, but it might.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll. I don't know how long that'll take. Oh, right there we go. Right away. Okay. 1 second. Sorry, folks, for the minor delay. We'll have KP back in here, and then we'll continue everything with the discussion. Okay. Okay, we have KP back with us. There we go.
Is it better?
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Okay. All right. Thanks for bearing with us. I've been playing music for a really long time, just ever since I was a child. And when I was in high school, like I wanted to start bands and I wanted to play in bands. And so I did that, where I grew up in this Coast Salish territory. There's this little city called Anacortes, and Anacortes has a really cool music scene, and a music scene that is really focused on all ages. And so when I was in high school, like I was invited to play at this music venue, and that sort of kind of like kickstarted this thing for me where I was like, oh, you can, play shows at venues, and like it can be really fun and a really beautiful experience. And being from this area, there's a lot of like there's a really kind of vast music history, and so I got to know a lot of the history of musicians who, there's a lot of like famous kind of musicians, or at least like well-known musicians, like in the territory of my homelands. And so music was just a big like passion of mine. And I particularly was just really into like expressing my identity through music and expressing who I was. And I identify as queer, and I'm really passionate about like supporting LGBTQ and women's like communities and interests and whatnot. And so I was really drawn to Riot Girl, and I was really drawn to the grunge scene, and like this is like really like DIY kind of stuff in in so-called Washington State. And Portland, Oregon actually caught my attention because there was a camp there called the Rock and Roll Camp for Girls. And I decided to go when I was in high school, and then met a lot of really amazing people who I'm still friends with to this day. So, in terms of just like music, like I've been playing music for a long time, and I feel like I will always play music. Portland, when I was living there, I went to college there, and I played in a ton of bands there. And it was just, for a while, it seemed more so to me like a hobby. Like I was like, this is my really passionate hobby that I was doing. But because Portland has like such this interesting music scene, I started to realize, oh, this can be more than a hobby. It can be something that you just do as your life. It can be your life's work. You can be in a band, and you can go on tour, and there are ways where you can support yourself financially that way as well. And so I, with this band that I have right now called Black Belt Eagle Scout, that's sort of the route that I chose to go towards, was to just go, full-fledged musician on tour all the time. And the sort of like genre that I guess that I would like sort that I'm in, what I guess is called, it's indie rock. But I feel like I play music in different areas, and I also like to like kind of sit back and I'm like, is it like who am I within this genre? Like I don't know, that's a whole other discussion. But so I feel like within like the structure of indie rock in the United States, there's this sort of track that you go on as a musician, where you're like, you go on tour, you put out records, you play these clubs, you play these bars, you do all these, like a lot of people do this. You can play it at different capacities. And I feel like I've been on that track, and where I am now, I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that necessarily how I how I have been doing it. And so yeah, I feel very lucky and privileged to put had support in putting out records, and have support, and having somebody help me book my tours. And so yeah, I'm sort of in this weird spot in my life where I still identify as a musician, but I'm trying to figure out like where I'm gonna go and what that's gonna look like for myself. And yeah, it's really I would like to know everybody's sort of history what what everyone's process is and what journey they're taking. Because I feel like I've been on a journey for a while, and I want to take the next exit to go on this other journey. But yeah, that's, I guess, just a little bit about what I've been doing.
Awesome. No, that's amazing. That's nice to hear your story, because I've always wondered about that. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have always wondered about, like, you know, the origin of a band and a group, and it's nice to hear that. And yeah, it always is, like, you know, something that is always changing, and especially for Indigenous folks too, like, you know, in this, I don't want to say industry, but in this community, and as writers and musicians, like, we're constantly looking for new things and how to evolve from where we were before, and moving forward, and you know, that changes, like, good, and like how that looks for people is always different, and it's good, you know, like, to look at those questions and everything. And Wyatt, like, you know, we actually had a conversation like this before, just like talking about, you know, the release of your music coming up, and you know, like, what and everything that's going to be happening in the next little bit for you. And so I guess, like, yeah, what has your experiences been so far? And, like, you know, have things been changing for you, and, you know, your lived experience from releasing your singles and releasing Dancing with Sue, and now moving into the release of your I guess that would be your LP coming up. What has that been like, and from the time you first started writing music, your lived experience up until this point?
Yeah, great question. It's pretty, I guess my musical upbringing was pretty natural. I always, you know, kind of answering these personal questions, always resort to mentioning my dad. My dad always gets a shout out, but both my parents were pretty musical, but he, you know, he taught me guitar pretty early, and I learned on, you know, the Beatles, like when I discovered the Beatles and how, you know, what songs could be. And then Hendrix is more of like kind of my bluesier, kind of laid back vibe that I get when I, you know, if I'm put into a band kind of setting. But yeah, I guess I experimented more with choirs, as well as really I gravitated towards being part of that community, and seeing how my voice sort of blends with other people. That sort of realization was really eye-opening, and I further took education to Red Deer College. I graduated there, just like a basic music diploma, and that really helped. You know, I did a basic piano class, and just kind of learning more of the theory really helped, I think, in the process of creating this first record. Yeah, I guess creating Dancing with Sue, that first single off the record, it seems like forever ago. It was pre-COVID, and, you know, we talked about just, you know, it's with my friend Phoenix Warren here, and he has a home studio, and it just kind of felt natural to record with him, and sort of create that environment. It's so welcome, his studio. But I guess, yeah, it's been a process recording the record, because I think the first single, when I released it under the label Slow Weather, I'm gonna release the record off of them, but yeah, what was I saying? I guess when I released Dancing with Sue and sort of figured out, you know, how I engaged with the audience there, and it was all very positive and really helpful for the during COVID, and also for the record as well. But I think I realized a lot of people, you know, they sort of predict what sort of record you're going to put out just by like one song, and the first song was sort of like a test of kind of rebranding myself, and putting myself in more important roles, and taking, you know, being accountable for the things I put into. But yeah, I think this record's gonna surprise a lot of people, which I'm really just excited to explore that more and yeah, explore more after, and hopefully people can relate. Yeah, I went on a little bit, but
No, that's great, and I'm really excited for your record and when it's going to be released and all of that, everything that's going to happen with it, especially with Dancing with Sue. Like, you know, everyone got an idea of like where you're kind of heading, and now we're just waiting for what's going to come in the future, and it's really exciting. Hannah, I know like with your band, with their generation, you know, you're just in a way being introduced into like the performing side of the music community, and you know, getting again your foot through the door and starting up that way. And like, what has it been like since, like, you know, you give a brief background of like, you know, what like more like about your grandpa and all of that stuff. How did that, I guess in a way, I guess if you'd be willing to share, like how did they start off with their music and then leading into like influencing you folks and your band to do what you're doing, and what has it been like with those performances that you've had those experiences with for right, you know, currently, in the past, and leading up to where third generation is now?
Yeah, well, it's kind of it's a long history to try and just condense. But I guess it all stems back to, unfortunately, the residential schools. When my grandpa, he was, taken away from his home when he was 5, and he always talked about how his mom sang to him, and that kind of like, this was before he went to the residential schools, and that's what kind of got him through that whole experience. Was he just always remembered his mom singing to him, which is, hearing that as grandchildren, it's really sad to hear. And then, but the thing is, he doesn't look at the negative side. He looks at the positive sides of it. He remembers dances at the residential schools. There was this dance where that was the first time he heard Elvis Presley and Buddy Holly, and that just, sparked it as a whole shift for him. And it's what got him through really tough times. So by the time he left residential schools, he was like, I'm gonna be a rock and roller. And one of the most profound stories he ever told us was when the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show. That just changed everything for him. And right there, he knew that his future, his meaning for his life was always going to be music. And so that was, the next few years, he started bands with his cousins, kind of similar to us. And he had a few. There was Sundog, Crowfoot, I believe Moccasin Slap, and a few others. So it was pretty cool. And the later on he went with performing. There's, when we meet some older couples in their 40s, 50s, they always say that if it weren't for my grandpa's bands and his music, they wouldn't have gotten together. So, he set up a lot of couples on 6 Ago, which is pretty neat, and it's a fun story. Very sweet. And then he met my grandma, and that changed everything for him. He realized that his life now has more meaning, and it's not just music anymore. It's his wife, and it's his life. And they had 3 children: my mom, my uncle, and my aunt. And music was still going on within the family. He still kept it close to his heart. As my mom, Aaron's dad, and our aunt got older, they started playing rock and roll themselves and started a band called Eagle Hill. So it was my grandpa and his 3 kids, and they were going around doing dances at high schools and whatnot. And so in a sense, that was the second generation. And then we came along. It's kind of in our blood, the music, and we grew up with the instruments in the basement, and kind of made sense to start playing and jamming. And the very first gig we ever got was at Runners One, 6 Ago's Runners One. And we were in our early teens. So I was it was nerve-wracking going on and playing, but it was a really fun experience. It was pretty neat. Our very first gig was, in front of our own people. It was we were comfortable. We were excited, and then, we wanted to take it further, and we found some gigs around Strathmore. So there are just some festivals, kind of just, getting our foot in the door, and that was interesting. And then we started, getting more gigs here and there in Calgary. We got older, came of age, so we could go to the bars and play there. Uh, and 2019 was probably the best year because we played in different bars in Calgary, and we even went to Banff. We played at the Rose and Crown. So it was a lot of experience. Every few months we'd have a few gigs here and there, and it was really fun. And we thought, okay, we're taking off, like next year's gonna be even better. But then COVID hit, and so kind of just fizzled out. But before COVID hit, we went on this First Nations music tour, and we played locally at the different Treaty 7 nations. So we went to Bigunny, we went to Gaina, Tsuut'ina. We didn't get to, go further to Chiniki or Wesley, but we played in new areas in front of, our close relations of, our brothers and sisters in a sense. So that's kind of where we left off with performing, going places. After that is just, online, doing that stuff, which was fun, but that experience kind of just, left on. We didn't get to further it, but we're looking forward to hopefully in the near future going back out and checking out new places.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's funny hearing about your grandpa's story, like him transitioning from like obviously the experiences he had at the residential school, but then moving into becoming a rocker and living out that life coming from Siksika, and it's just like it just hits close to home hearing that story, because even for my parents, they met through music as well. Like my mom saw my dad as he was drumming in a band, and it was just like things connected and everything, and that's kind of like the origin of my story in a way. but it's really funny just to hear like how he being a part of the community, like the music he had or was creating brought people together, and that's really important, especially for Siksika, like just how we are, and yeah, it's really cool, just nice and heartwarming hearing that story. And Matt, like for you've had we've actually have had our own work together doing stuff with Ositsiwan in Edmonton, with Niheowag, in your work as in that band, and all of your work moving up into asterisms and the release of asterisms. What has your experience been like, like having, since Niheowag has had that boost and we're like, signed to a label and started playing and performing all over, touring, all that stuff. What has your experience been like since when you first started in music up until this point, and now, you're doing solo stuff with asterisms on the same label with Niheowag? What has that been like?
Wow. I guess, yeah, long journey, I suppose. I think, I'm going to start way back. I think I always really, really liked listening to music. I grew up in Lac La Biche, and then I think I was around 13, I moved to Edmonton, and I just really, really got into listening to music. And I think one day I just decided that I was going to be a musician. I was listening to music, and I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I just feel like I haven't stopped moving since then, working since then, being a teenager, just learning to play guitar. I listened to a lot of like 90s, like noisy 90s guitar bands. a lot of like shoegaze stuff and noise rock stuff. And I think that's it was like the biggest influence on me as a teenager. And I just slowly just started getting into the music scene in Edmonton. I started gigging when I was maybe 19, playing in a bunch of different bands. And Nahiwak kind of came from that. I met Chris through the local scene, and us being two of the only Indigenous people in the music scene, and at least the indie music scene in Edmonton, decided to start a band with his cousin. And that's kind of how that took off. So it was like, you know, of course, I pretty much only played with white people before that. So it was nice that was a really nice thing. You know, I love playing with other Indigenous people. It's enriching. And that project we did with Otsitsi-Wan, that was just a huge ensemble of Indigenous musicians. It's just amazing. Like I've never had anything like that. It's so much fun. Yeah, so I think things kind of grew from there. Nahiwak, you know, we toured a lot, recorded an album, Arts and Crafts put it out, and at that kind of the relationship was established there, so they wanted to put out my solo album, so we did that, and it's my kind of it's all instrumental ambient synthesizer music for the most part, synthesizers and a little bit of guitar. It's like a audio diary, ambient works. And I don't know, I guess that's like a sort of abridged thing, but yeah, I kind of moved from that to where I am right now, since the bands aren't really a thing right now. I have another band that I sing and play guitar in called Slow Girl Walking that I want to do more with, but just because of COVID, I'm not. So I can make my own music in my bedroom. So I've been trying to do that as much as I can. And of course, making music for people's like documentaries and like podcasts and short films and animations and all that. I'm not really sure how I got into that. I mean, I think it's something I wanted to do. It was a lot of just letting people know. It's like, hey, you do this, let me know if you want music, because I like making music. And I've been getting a decent amount of that, and I really enjoy that work. And especially I've been collaborating with a lot of Indigenous people in that capacity, which is really great. You know, helping Indigenous people tell their stories, you know, about language or residential school survivors or any other sort of thing. It's a lot of stories that need to be told, and I'm glad to help in some way. And I'm just kind of keeping going, trying to work on more music. My next album, I think Asterisms, came out in October. Vinyl is finally ready. This is my first album I've ever released on vinyl under my own name, which is very exciting. And yeah, I'm just gonna keep on working as much as I can on my own music and music for other people. And I don't really know what I'm saying anymore, so.
That's okay. It's good to just like, you know, talk about what you're doing, and that's really important. To hear your story is really, really important. And it is, you're right, like the fact that you get to, you know, you do get to connect with other Indigenous artists now. You know, I'll admit too, like a lot of the times, majority of times I've been in bands, I've only played with like non-Indigenous people or like Napiguans, like white people. And so it's always difficult navigating the indie scene and finding, you know, a handful of Indigenous people that are just in the city and they're just like playing music too. You know, it can be difficult sometimes. So I feel that for sure. Which is actually is kind of interesting because like that kind of almost goes into the next question, and we have time for about 2 more questions. And the next question is kind of a big one, and I don't want anyone to any of you folks to feel like, again, I don't want you to feel like you just answer it like however you feel, but like in being Indigenous and an Indigenous musician, it is a lot of the times when I've had my own experiences, as like being sometimes a curator or being a part of a festival or even performing solo stuff or performing in bands, once I've identified as an Indigenous person, the experiences start to shift and change. And so my question for all of you is, and we'll start with KP. Like, what is your, if it's okay to start with you, what has your experience been like so far? Like in a situation where you're playing a show or you're working on some project or writing music or doing an interview. Does it change the level of engagement that those people have with you if you identify or have ever identified as an Indigenous musician or person through your music? Has that ever changed, or have you had an experience where they just change their perspective on you in a way? Because sometimes that happens to me. But yeah.
Okay. Oh my gosh. I knew you were gonna ask me first, and I was like, what do I say? So having like the way that my like music operates, I have a booking agent and I have a publicist and I have a manager and I have a music label. So I've been set up in this world of like, you can, be interviewed by people and, have been set up to be interviewed by people while I've been touring on the road and have done extensive touring, most of the time, like 2 to 3 months in chunks throughout the year. And so I preface that because I've done a lot of interviews to help promote, the shows that I'm doing. And some of them are just weird. Like some of them are like, why am I talking to this person? Like, I don't understand. Like, I feel like I've become more picky about what I do because of the way I've been perceived and the way that, when I speak, like I really, first and foremost, like to be able to talk to either Indigenous people or, BIPOC people, because I feel like there's a better understanding of how to tell, a story of myself, especially because, what the music that I make is about my identity and it's about me as a person. And it's specifically like, expressing who I am. And that comes from me. And so I've, there have been weird times where like, I feel like, and actually I don't really like to read a lot of things because I feel like I get scared about like what people will write and if they'll, say something stereotypical about my music, or if, there was one time where I played a show and the promoter, who was white, made a poster and then like put this like tribal art on it for my band, which it's like, it was so like, there's all these like weird things that I think that like people are still needing to, learn, in that way of trying to, not be as ignorant. So because I've done a lot of touring and a lot of interviews, I have run into challenges that have been difficult to navigate. And not all the time. There's a handful of times, but I think that I don't know. There's I was having a hard time trying to figure out how to answer this question because it's like it's complicated. It's a complicated question, and I feel like everybody has a very different experience depending on like who they are, where they're from, and how, what sort of music they play, how much they play, like what sort of band they're in, if it's a band at all, if it's like more of like a performance or, So, but is there another, what's the other part of the question? I sort of like lost my train of thought.
just like you answered it, I think. No, but I think what I was just like, yeah, like how do people perceive you, like once you say like, oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I identify as being indigenous, like does it shift, like does it change their thinking?
I will say one more thing about that. I was talking with some friends, and sometimes, and what was brought up was that, sometimes you just have to name who you are, or else someone else is going to name you. And so I feel like that's what I did. I named who I am because I didn't want someone else to name myself. And because like I'm indigenous and because I'm queer and play music, like I wanted to be able to own that for myself. And that's my choice. Not everyone has to do that, but that was sort of what I was, I wanted to be upfront about, like, this is who I am, because my music is about me. It's about my identity. It's about my journey in life. And I'm sharing like, these vulnerable times in my life through the sounds that I create, through the instrumentation, through some of the lyrics, through the story that I tell through music. So I felt in particular for me that it was important to be upfront about who I am, because I didn't want somebody to, try and tell that story of who I was before I could name it first. And, people have, said it like beautifully, eloquently, but then there have been stumbles where it hasn't been told as much. And because I'm lucky to work with a team of people, and have a publicist and a manager, I'm able to have those conversations and sort of, try and control that narrative as much as I can. But that's not always a possibility if you're, if you work alone, or if you, depending on where you are in your journey in music. So that's my answer.
Catching them before they call us something else. Okay. Yeah, no, that's important though. Like I think that's like really important that like for us in me and my partner and even Hannah's culture, like naming is really important. That's really important to who we are as a people, that you have an Indian name, when from birth until like you move into your adulthood and your career and everything like that. And not letting other people name you is like an important step in that. And then people identifying you as they should identify you, because it's you choosing it and you how you want people to acknowledge you, right? And that's really important. And I think that's really powerful and speaks to the music that a lot of us are creating, and the music you're creating, to be able to say, well, this has a name, it has a purpose, this is who I am, it talks about me. And I guess for Hannah, like, do you again, just like moving into how you have been just starting and performing more often, do you see like a difference when you tell someone that you are Blackfoot or you come from Siksika, or when you're just saying you're indigenous and you're like doing a live performance virtually or at these bars that you now get to go to and perform at? Like, have you had different experiences there, or do people try to like make you like like sometimes we face tokenism, and that could be like a huge thing too? And have you ever had experiences or have any changes in that when you identify as being Blackfoot or indigenous?
In all honesty, I don't know if it's, we're kind of still naive and just really getting into the whole music industry, but personally, I can't speak for the other two, but I really haven't found that we've faced any sort of discrimination when performing, at these bars. We always introduce ourselves and say we're from Siksika, and a lot of the times they're wooing for us, that sort of thing. They find it really amazing, honestly. Like they'll just say how they've heard about our culture, or that they know some musicians from Siksika, Carlin from Iron Tusk and No More Moments. Everybody knows them, right? So they're just like, yeah, Carlin. So it kind of saying that we're from Siksika, that we're indigenous. It kind of gives us a bit of connections and more opportunity to discuss other bands and just asking us how our experience has been so far. But with being Indigenous, I think, in all honesty, for me especially, when going on stage, it's more of identifying as a musician first, which, I know that once we start really owning the Indigenous identity on stage and bringing that to the forefront, then I think, that there's probably going to be a shift some way, somehow. But when we have the mindset of like, hope we're going to play well, I hope we're all tuned up, stuff like that, it kind of takes away from allowing negativity in. Perhaps we have faced some discrimination, but it's none that I've really taken to heart or found was just, a bit unbelievable, and you kind of, shake your head. If anything, it's outside of music that when identifying as an Indigenous person, that's where I face most, you know, discrimination and unfairness. But when it comes to music, it feels very wholesome, and it's very, it's not the way that we're in this sort of unfairness. Um, we've played shows where we were the only Indigenous people, the only Indigenous band. And again, right there, it wasn't where we were nervous, but it does, when you do think about it, it kind of does put a lot on your shoulders when you are the only Indigenous band. It's like you got to represent, you got to, make sure that you're not actually thinking about it. I think the only time that it gets a bit, um, we almost have to watch ourselves if we're at a bar, that the basic stereotype with alcohol, that sort of thing, right? I'm always telling the other two, like, we gotta be careful. You don't want to feed into their discrimination sometimes, which is unfortunate. So I think that's the only time, is just trying to be one step ahead of the game and just make sure that we're representing ourselves properly. Yeah, other than that, it hasn't been too bad, but definitely keeping an eye on that, making sure that we know how to answer questions without, like what KP said, when you don't want someone else to name you. So that's some good advice for us as up and coming musicians, making sure that we're holding on to our identity and not letting anyone else name us themselves. So yeah, that's that.
That's awesome. And you all of you guys as a group, or your band as a group, you're representing Siksika really well. But like the fact that you have like standards in place, hey, that like who you are when you go into that place, and that you haven't faced levels of discrimination, and you haven't had those experiences, and with those standards in place, I feel like when you do move into, if you do face experiences like this, like hopefully not that you don't, but you will have those, like you'll know what to do, and focus on the outcome of performing, and again representing Siksika. So that's really really important, and it's really positive to hear that. And yeah, and like Wyatt, what do you think as far as like whenever you've had to like go into a space and like releasing this record, or talking to a label, or just talking with other folks about like who you are and your identity as being Indigenous and Cree, and that background, what has that been like, like those experiences from when you just like say, oh yeah, this is who I am, I'm Indigenous, this is my background. Like, do you see changes there or shifts there in how they perceive you or engage with you?
Yeah, I definitely recognize myself in these sort of spaces, um, and being that sort of only representation. Um, I feel like I don't think more of it. I guess I let sort of the music kind of speak for itself in a lot of these spaces and opportunities. Um, but I feel like just even uh, you know more and more kind of interview style kind of over the Zoom. That's kind of what the digital age that we're in now. That I'm kind of in after creating the record and then marketing it. I'll know I have to be put in those spaces, and what kind of KP said is kind of curating it for yourself, what feels good, and having your team support that. So I'm in the process of learning that, and building my team that's able to again share the vision and recognize how I stand and what my identity is, but going back to, I guess, having interviews with people, I find it's easier to use my indigenous heritage as a way to, in a very spiritual way, just kind of talking about my music. And it's the one question is describing your music. It's hard to do that, but I find if I can bring it into more of a spiritual way of when I get on stage, it's very much a natural second home for me. I'm sort of singing with my ancestors, and that's kind of what I resort to as well. It helps me sort of describe and have people perceive myself a little bit easier, I guess. Open-mindedness, but yeah, like I said, I'm still learning everything about it. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome that you have that time to like, especially right now, you have that time to like learn and move through those experiences, and as you getting ready to release your is this your first full length? Sorry, I wanted to clarify that with
the debut record.
Yeah, your debut LP. That's going to be something amazing, and as as you move through more of that and understanding what those experiences are going to be like, and just what the record's going to look like, and all that stuff. And singing,
I'd have to say, for sure. I'm just grateful for people like you. The label I'm a part of is predominantly white, and even kind of the audience I've been thrown to it, having the single sort of more in like a country, more of the country field, I guess, is predominantly white. So just kind of navigating that and staying true to myself and surrounding myself with people like with you and other indigenous artists and BIPOC as well. There's so many great people that I benefit from just from their experiences.
Thank you, Sugafi. I appreciate that. And and it's all a collective effort too. It's really important that we lean on each other when we need to, and when we have to, and and move forward in that way. And I guess Matt, your band Neheowag, which is on a hiatus right now. You as a group, you created its own weird, it's really funny to say, but your own genre, moccasin gaze, and you use it as a term that people caught on to. I guess maybe more so in Canada. Out here or up north, a lot of people there are so many bands now that are coming out there saying oh yeah, we're moccasin gays. But I remember when Neheowag first made that statement, we're moccasin gays, and I was like, holy, this is really good. And it's because I know we had conversations about that too. But what has that been like for yourself? Playing in these bands prior to Neheowag and after. When you identify that you are Cree, you are Indigenous, and just what those experiences have been like. Have people also shifted their perspective or engaged with you differently in some way? And what has that been like? What has your experience been like through that?
Well, I think I experience it in a different way than some other people would, for sure. I think being white passing, I feel like I've definitely brought it up that I'm Indigenous in the past and have people kind of change their tone around me. And I feel like sometimes there's when you say you're an Indigenous musician, people will go into it with like an expectation of how it will sound, or some people will do that. And, you know, I feel like Nahiwak had a performance once at an art gallery, and people were like, this isn't Indigenous music. Like, what is this? It's like, oh, sorry, you know, we don't have the powwow drums out. Like, I don't know. But, you know, like, I know I don't experience it in the same way as a lot of my peers would. But it's interesting, like, you know, sometimes you'll get like put on put in a workshop with a bunch of other Indigenous musicians at like a festival, and it's like, it doesn't really make sense, but it's like, oh, well, they're all, you know, they're not white, so let's have them collaborate. But yeah, like, it is, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, that's okay. You know, it's different for everyone in their experiences, and you know how we move about through, I guess, through this community, and how we move about when like sharing our music. It's always going to be different, and you know, some, like, again, experiences will be positive, and other experiences might be negative, or in between, you know, or like in and out, like, you know, they're flowing in a different way, you know. But I'm really thankful for you sharing that, and I'm gonna, I think we have time for, if you're able to answer this quickly, or as quick as possible. Don't want to rush it. But the last question I want to ask, and I've been wanting to ask this question to a lot of you, but who or what is your greatest influence in the music you write or create? I know, Hannah, you briefly mentioned a bit about like, you know, your background and your grandpa, but are there other influences that you know, for third generation, and what you folks are writing as a group and creating?
Yeah, well, we've always had a love for classic rock, and it's not just, you know, not just the Beatles. Of course, we love the Beatles, but there's even the Beach Boys. You know, they're a family band, which is very inspiring to us, and that's more of like inspiration of just a band in general. But I think writing wise, we really like for me personally, I like more folk stuff. I like folk music. And then Erin, she plays the bass. She loves the more harder rock kind of music, like Black Sabbath, you know, stuff like that. So, and Lennon, he's right in the middle of that. So he like brings both of us together. Or Erin's heavy stuff, bass lines, and then my, you know, guitar picking sort of stuff. And we're, you know, starting to find our way within that. And then on a larger scale, of course, our grandpa, he influences us to, you know, write our own stuff, share our own stories, our own experiences with music, and so far our journey within life. And then with, you know, in pop culture, Indigenous rock and rollers like Exit, Redbone, and Robbie Robertson from the band. You know, he's one of my favorite guitarists. So, and just listening to his music and the way he writes and incorporates Indigenous rock and roll is very inspiring, and it just, you know, inspires us to do the same and bring our own stories into it. And I guess really quick, I don't want to take too long, but I don't know if you guys have watched Rumble, The Indians Who Rock the World. It's a very inspiring rock and roll story. And so that right now we're just really, you know, trying to explore Indigenous musicians, and even on the local scale, you know, playing at these different festivals, we've met a lot of musicians, Indigenous musicians, that have inspired us in different ways. So yeah, that's our story so far.
Awesome. That's a handful of great musicians, especially Redbone, and like going all the way back and whatnot. That's so awesome. And yeah, thank you for sharing. KP, would you be willing to just give like just share, like, you know, what influences you in the music you write, either as a solo artist or with Black Belt Eagle Scout as a whole?
Yeah. So The way that I play music right now is I create all of the instruments. I play all the instruments and I create all the sounds myself. And that's sort of what I'm still trying to focus on. I haven't played music with people and creating in a long time. And I think it's because I'm just trying to figure out still like who I am and like what my place is in this world. And so like when you know ask about like your influence, like I feel like when I think of that question, like more so like the reasons why I play music pop into into my brain of like taking up space as an Indigenous person and like you know my connection with my ancestors and the land and the water of my homelands in Swinomish. I'm also like I feel very influenced and inspired by Indigenous, queer, and trans voices and water protectors and protectors of the land. You know, I feel like for me, like I try and put a lot of my spirit into playing music and try and like, or at least not try, it just so it happens. Like I just like whenever I play, I have this connection to my spirit, it comes out. And so I think there's a lot of things of foundational things I think that influence me in my you know in my surroundings of creating music and of writing music.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And that's amazing. Like that's so awesome to hear about, like, you know, what is helping, you know, helping you build the music you create, and hearing about that, and how those are, you know, helping direct in some ways for your music. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Wyatt, would you be willing to share too your influences and the music you write and create, or if you have specific influences for your record that you're coming out with?
Yeah, I guess right now a lot of my peers are coming out with some great stuff, and yeah, I guess for the record, I'm trying to think what would some of my friends' records, and then I know that I'm kind of past that point where you know I'm thinking about even the second record and what influences I can pull from to kind of fit the vibe I'm looking for. But yeah, there's a lot of great BIPOC artists. In particular, one that I always resort to is Sun Little. There's this really great cover that I sort of make my own, and it's by him, and he's from Philadelphia, um, and there's another one as well. I can't think of, but yeah, I'm more so on a writing standpoint, I guess. My fiance, I have a little puppy too, and been going on walks a little more. So just kind of being outside and being more in touch with the land there has been a really great influence on me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really important. Like, you know, to what you and KP have both said about, like, you know, the land is really important to us, and how we, you know, interact with it, and how it helps, you know, is a guiding mechanism in a lot of ways, and into how we into just like how we like think and create, and bring on that creativity. And it is really a powerful thing to be able to do that. And even, yeah, as what KP said, like, you know, sharing respect to people that are, or people that are out on the front lines and doing the work, and you know, want, like, working to protect these lands and these territories that we come from. It is really important to have those influences. And for you, why, you know, being able to take those walks are really important, to have those like small connections or bigger connections to the land and the area you're in is like really important. Matt, you know, being like, what for you, like, how did everything come to you creating like Asterisms, and moving into the solo project from all the music you've written, and what has influenced that past music and this today?
Well, past music. I mean, well, so many things. Like, I think I was saying, like, a lot of 90s guitar rock bands, like Smashing Pumpkins and Sonic Youth and Dinosaur Jr., a lot of that really noisy stuff, and My Bloody Valentine, like had a massive like shoegaze phase for many years. So a lot of that Creation Records stuff, 4ADs, My Bloody Valentine, Slow Dive, Cocteau Twins, all that stuff. And I think from that I got more into electronic music, and from that I got into like minimalist composers. So there's like a big mishmash of things that have influenced me over the years. And Asterisms, I think, is just kind of all these things condensed. Like I really like Steve Reich, the minimalist composer, as well as Eric Satie, and Jim O'Rourke is a big influence on me, who does, I mean, just like almost any kind of music, it seems. Just noise stuff to pop music to jazz and ambient. And for Asterisms, it was really, that was just like maybe very self-reflective music, and just kind of playing and discovering things I liked and capturing them, kind of things that represented the mood of the mood, whatever I was feeling at that point, and whatever way, whatever emotionally or mentally, just kind of trying to capture that, or maybe not trying to, maybe it's just that's what it was. I think it was just being inspired by the instrument itself is, I think, is something I do a lot. Is the sound informs the part. The sound informs the song, and that's why I think I work a lot with synthesizers, because there's like a weird, it can be very interactive with it, and it can inspire you. You can just change things and it'll take you to different places. So the sound and instruments inspire me a lot. And I guess what comes from inwards.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing it. And yeah, like hearing those artists, like like all the shoegaze stuff, like again, like all that stuff. We talk about that a lot. Being pals and stuff. Like we both are into the same kind of music there, and it's really awesome to hear that and hear about your other influences to how Asterisms came about. It's really awesome. And we've reached the end of the questions that I have. I just want to say sukapi to all of you for being part of this conversation. There's a lot of stuff here that we've talked about that has really been powerful for me to hear, and to hear about your stories, and to like I'm so used to just like being at a show or helping run a show or something like that, or performing at a show, that I don't, we don't always get to have these kinds of discussions where we can talk about, queer identity, like the different movements that are coming out through, talking about our land and talking about the spaces that we need to be occupying and that are rightfully ours, that we need to, take up that space and be able to talk about these things, talk about what influences us, and, how we're moving forward in the music that we're trying to build and create individually, and then talking about personally what affects us. That's important for us to talk about all of these things, and to just to share, like that's really important. And yeah, I just thank you so much for being part of this discussion. And I think we have enough time for one question from the audience, and I don't know if this is directed to any of the artists, but Juliet, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, hi, thanks so much, Curtis. There's a question that came in from Patrick Lemoine, who's an educator, and I'll just paraphrase it, but I don't know if you work in educational environments at all, but Patrick brings in Indigenous musicians into the classroom for his grade 7 to 12 students, and they're learning guitar. He's wondering what makes a learning environment meaningful and authentic for Indigenous youth. And if you experienced support inspiration in any of those settings when you were coming up? I know I've heard of grandparents being inspiring, and friends, but I'm wondering if you've got any advice on that.
I have something to say.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have Indigenous mentors for Indigenous youth. I think it's important for Indigenous youth to see Indigenous adults or relatives, walking about in the world and participating. And I believe in spaces that can be free from white supremacy and can be free from, settler colonialism. So in terms of education with youth, and in particular Indigenous youth, I think that, having Indigenous to Indigenous mentorship is important. But that's just one slice of the pie. I feel like there's a lot of slices. That's the first thing that came to my mind.
That answers it for me too. Like that's so important. Like, that's like, thank you for the question, but what KP said is the truth.
Absolutely. And I was thinking, we had a conversation in the fall with in response to Dylan Robinson's book, Hungry Listening. And he was talking about, there's the land back movement, and thinking about land, there's land, but there's also the ground that we stand on. The ground can be institutions like education. How do non-Indigenous folks give up that land and that ground? How do you make space? And that's institutions of education, could be record labels, could be venues, festivals, all those aspects of music community as well. So yeah. I see some comments flying by thanking everyone. So Curtis, do you have anything else to say, or is it a wrap?
No. Did anyone else want to answer that question quick? If you have a thought towards that, and you don't feel like you have to. Like, I don't, like, that's a loaded question, and I don't think we should be like, stressed out about that question too much.
Yeah. Okay.
Nope. Okay. But yeah, KP, like, to that question, like, answer it perfectly. Like, that's, it's the truth. But for me, again, thank you to everyone for being a part of this discussion. I know it went a little longer than expected, but thank you for having patience with us. And just like, but that being said, these stories are what people need to hear. If you're asking questions like this individual asked, like, that, like, these are the stories that will help give an understanding to that, and hearing our truths and how we view things is like the most important part of working in, I don't want to say decolonizing, but working and changing how the music community, changing and shifting its perspective on us as a people, and us just occupying and taking up that space is so important. And so I just thank everyone here for being a part of that, and to CNMN for offering us the platform to take up that space. I appreciate that a lot. Sukapi to you guys, to you folks for helping us out, and just giving us the time to be here. And thank you, KP, Wyatt, Hannah, Matthew. You folks are amazing people, amazing writers, amazing musicians, and I'm so excited for the music you're going to come out with in the future. And and if you have any closing comments right now, the floor is open to you to share anything you'd like to share, or if not, that's fine. We can say, see you later, get a mutsin, however you like to, if you want to share anything right now.
In my language, I'd say tehek debu, which means take care of yourself.
Thank you. I'm going to add one last thing, which is just a reminder for everyone that's here on the call. If you want to come back, April 22nd, there's the last in this series, and it's curated by Gabriel Darmou, who's a composer, vocalist, a drag performer, and a researcher and an improviser. So stay tuned, look at our Facebook and Instagram channels to get more details of that. And I just want to say it's been a real honor to have you all here, to hear about your music and your journey and your influences, and I've been listening to your music before the conversation, and now I want to listen even more. There's a ton of links in the chat. Please go out, everyone who's here, go to Bandcamp, listen, buy music. And yeah, it's just been a real pleasure to spend this time with you. So thank you so much for being here. Thanks.